Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. So, Grinding Gear Games have had a little bit of a mess on their hands ever since the overbuffing of the temple took place in patch 0.4.0c. I put out a video on that when it happened, and I underestimated how big the buffs were. I thought it was a gigabuff. It was much more than that. Today, they have decided to largely reverse that, and this is going to be a change that is going to infuriate nearly everyone. Let me explain that. It was very noticeable from looking at the Path of Exile 2 subreddit, from just looking at other places that people discussed the game, that there were really two camps that were crystallizing in terms of opinion about 040. There was one group that was saying, this is the best the game's ever been, this is the best the game will probably ever be, there's no way this stays in the future, get all your divines, get all of the progress now, you'll never be able to get it again. Those people were loving it. Those were the people who loved Path of Exile 1's Affliction League, loved the Necropolis League, loved the Freesia event, the times that Path of Exile 1 had the highest loot it's ever had. Or in some cases, they only liked the first one of those events that they played, which for most of them was Affliction because that was the one that came first. So there was that group of people, the people that were like, yeah, this is awesome, give me more of this, always do this, crazy loot is really good. The second group of people were looking at an inflating trade league economy and going, oh no, I'm getting further and further behind on all my league goals. Every time I log in, temple-induced inflation has set back my progress tremendously. I can never keep up with these people. Why even bother? Now, there is always a section of the player base that will say, don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Comparison is the thief of joy. Do your own thing. The problem is that what those other people are doing affects you, whether you want it to or not. So if one player goes, runs a temple, makes 100 divines, and does this literally 40 times in a day, come out with 4,000 divines, they have a lot of capacity to buy a tremendous amount of items that you might have wanted for your build, and they can quite simply outbid you on all of them. And they can crushingly outbid you as well. That's why we've seen so much inflation on the things that are genuinely rare and that the temple cannot provide. So any lineage support gems that come from bosses, I did a video about the effects on the economy the other day, and I'll put a link to it down in the description below. But this is not something like Expedition 33. In Expedition 33, if I buy an item off a merchant, and then you go to that same merchant in your playthrough and you buy the item from that merchant, the fact that I've purchased it hasn't changed the price you pay. But in Path of Exile 2, or for that matter, any other game that has a real trade league economy going on, anytime I make a transaction, that does affect you. It might be a very small effect if I'm buying only one perfect essence of battle and you just want one of them, but it might be huge if I was buying 170 perfect essences of battle for a crafting project, then that might mean that when you go around to buy one, it's quite a bit more expensive. So casual players don't affect each other very much through the trade league economy. When there's a section of the player base that becomes staggeringly wealthy through some sort of massive wealth generation, I'm not going to call it an exploit this time, but a setup that is just far beyond normal expectations, well, that does end up transforming the game for everyone else. Fundamentally, this second group of people recognize that any sort of trade in an online game is a PvP environment, and they feel like they're falling behind because their rivals in the trade league economy have received massive buffs, but they have not. That's where that second group are disappointed with the league. Anyways, most of the people in the second group, from my experience, were quitting the league. Most of the people in the first group were loving it and playing more than they normally did. Well, Grinding Gear Games came along with a patch today and said to the first group, no, your fun's over too, but we're not going to do enough, which would be a full economy reset, to then do something to make those second group happy either. I don't know who this patch is aimed at improving the league for. What I think is going on here is that there's probably a bunch of panic decisions being made where Grinding Gear Games see the unpopularity of the league and they're going, oh, we've got to change, pivot to more loot. Oh, pivoting to more loot really went badly, pivot to less loot again. Let's go through the actual changes themselves though. Added diminishing returns to the modifier values applied by rooms. This doesn't kick in unless you have 4 or more of a given room type placed. This change will have a minor impact on average temple setups, maybe none at all, but a relatively high impact on top-end temples. These temples are causing drastic server performance problems, often cases crashing. If you have enough rooms placed to engage the diminishing returns, it will apply to lower tier rooms first, making sure that your higher tier rooms benefit the temple as much as they can. Okay, so this completely addresses all of the snake shenanigans that were going on. So the actual rooms themselves that were causing all of the problems were the ones that provided large boosts to the amount of monster packs and or monster effectiveness and or rarity on certain categories of monsters. And if you went all in on one particular category, then you could get some really explosive results. These weren't actually more modifiers generally, but they kind of functioned like it because there were different categories that were multiplying together. For example, you could consider the Halls of War. This room increases the number of monster packs and increases the effectiveness of normal monsters. If you've got one of these, it's a 56% increase to the amount of normal monster loot that you get across the entire temple. But if you have 6 of them, then you're getting a 220% multiplier from the increased number of packs and 280% effectiveness. This is going to be a 616%, if my maths is right, multiplier to the amount of loot that you get from normal monsters. Now, this is just one example. There were better ones. There were also rooms that would then increase the effectiveness of this room by 30%. The core thing here was that you focused on one aspect of your temple and you scaled it as high as you could on 3 or 4 different multiplicative axes. And so when 040C came out and doubled the effectiveness of these modifiers, it went from being you were getting 3 small more modifiers that were all multiplying together to getting 3 large more multipliers that were all multiplying together. This ended up limit testing the loot system in Path of Exile 2, and I think it was a limit test that the game failed pretty badly. So in Path of Exile 1, what happens if you get near infinite rarity on a monster is that every single item that monster drops becomes a unique. This is something that was possible for a brief period, I think in patch 3.11, where there were bugged maps that were able to do this. You get ridiculous amounts of zone rarity, and this could cause completely broken shenanigans where every single item that dropped across an entire map was unique. However, in Path of Exile 1, there's no bias towards rarer uniques. As rarity starts getting higher, you would just get a selection of uniques that would be the same as a selection that someone else would get if they were doing casual mapping. The difference is you would get a lot more of them than the person that was doing the casual mapping. Path of Exile 2's loot system works very differently. That's not as disruptive though as having huge amounts of very fungible items like Divine Orbs dropping, and also things where the player base's general demand is pretty insatiable. So Hotfix 13 aims to address this by coming back and looking at some of the ways that these modifiers stack and putting some limits on them. The problem is that this is probably too little too late. For the people that are in that first group identified, the ones that love the brokenness, well, this is going to be a crushing blow to their fun in the league. But for probably the larger group, the people who were feeling that they were just being buried under the weight of the economic power of that first group, those people are now going to say, well, the ladder has been pulled up. They can no longer aspire to catching up to where the other group were. And at the same time, it's not going to mean that their loot that they get in the future from killing random monsters in maps is going to be any better. If you're doing a non-optimized temple strategy, or if you're just killing monsters randomly in maps, then your loot has already been devalued by the huge amounts that have been added in during 040C and 040C Hotfix 13, and that is not going to change. So the inflation that we've seen, whilst there might be some minor correction because there's no longer going to be a sense that things are going to get worse than it was, this is not going to address that underlying inflation that has already happened and it's already run away. Now, the remaining lines of text in here are less significant than that first one. That first one is the decisive thing, but we'll go through all of them anyway. Joatalotli's medallion can now only be placed on tier 3 rooms, so this is just a little bit of a restriction here. Most people, I don't think this is going to make a huge difference on, unless you're still in the temple setup. Also, the Golem Works and Spymaster rooms are going to have their bonuses swapped around. The intention here is that there be more variety in temple layouts. I think in practice, it's not going to result in more variety. It's going to result in more of a time barrier to setting the temple up. And then after this, there's an interesting line. Fixed a bug introduced in a post-040 hotfix that caused temples to spawn more magic and rare monsters than intended, especially at lower levels. Now, Grinding Gear Games went out of their way to increase the number of these monsters in the temple because it genuinely needed it. The early temple did not have enough of them. And they mention here that this has only a minor impact to higher level temples. Again, can't really say much without the details. Ultimately, though, the fact that this was posted 45 minutes ago and already has 18 pages of comments, so let's refresh that, 32 pages of comments now. And yeah, this is editing GOG close to the end of my pass through the video. You might actually notice if you go through the video, you'll see which parts I recorded originally and which parts I came back to re-record by having a look at the comments pages. But now it's 92 minutes since this post went up, and there are 86 pages of replies. This is on the Path of Exile official forums, which don't get a huge amount of traffic either. This is going to be a very unpopular patch. I don't think this is going to do anything to bring back the people who walked away from 040, because 040 felt like it was a league that was just hooking you in with FOMO on currency drops will never be this high again. At the same time, it's just going to alienate the people who were still enjoying it. This is how leagues die. It's not with a nerf, it's with a buff. Because ultimately, when we're talking about what it was that killed 040, it is going to be patch C. It is going to be that gigabuffing of loot that was set up in such a way that only the top echelon of players were able to get it. That is going to be the thing that 040 drove away a lot of players with, and it's going to be Hotfix 13 that's then going to alienate the players that were still playing. Grinding games need to do some thinking about Path of Exile 2's loot identity going forward, because I think that the loot system has demonstrably failed in 040. That's something that I've said in the past. I've not been happy with their decisions around increased item rarity being a player stat and things like that. I think it is now really urgent that they fix this and fix it for 0.50. I don't think they can really do much to fix the rest of 040. There'll be people, including myself, that will still continue to play, but I think that the league economy being this broken is something that is just going to alienate a lot of people, and we're not going to see those people back no matter what they do. So with that in mind, they should probably be thinking about what can we do to not repeat these mistakes when 050 comes around. Now, 050, I think, needs to have a full loot system overhaul, needs to be the moment that they get rid of player rarity on gear, needs to be the moment that they put some caps on just how ridiculous rarity on monsters can get in limit situations. And these should be caps that don't come up in normal gameplay, even in normal juiced gameplay, but it means that if they make big mistakes in the future, then those caps will then provide some sort of protection. I think one of the things grinding your game should do is work out, okay, what is the current highest monster rarity that you can get in the game, and have a setup that if a monster is slain with rarity that's substantially above that, and then it sends an email or an instant message or whatever to whoever the most senior balance related employee is that's currently in the office, and they can make an emergency decision as to, oh, something really has gone wrong here. It should have been sending alerts to Jonathan's email when there were temples that were dropping 40 divine orbs, and it wasn't just a one-off fluke, it was happening 30 times in a day, and then 30 times in an hour, and then 3 times in a minute. That should have been sending alerts to someone senior at Grinding Your Games so that they could have put this patch out earlier than they did. If they put this patch out earlier, it would have alienated a small number of people, but it might have saved the league. As it is, this is just simply too little too late. So I think that's the most important thing coming out of this. The other thing is, I'm very glad that this is coming before a private league that I'm going to be playing in that's going to be starting in a few days' time. It's not a league I'm running myself. It's being organized by Lolcohol and a couple of the other people that write regularly for Mobalytics, and there'll be some more details about it when there's something to announce. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results. Don't use one on the entire league's economy.